What's going on, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And today, I'm going to be doing an overview of the Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service Omnibus editions, including the latest volume, 5. So, join me. And welcome back, everybody. So today I am doing an overview of the Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service. It's one of my favorite horror manga. As a matter of fact, I added it to my list last year when I did my top 10 favorite horror manga. And I want to take a little time here to thank Dark Horse for sending us a copy of the latest volume. This is volume 5. Years in the making. I believe it was 2019 when we were supposed to get that. They got canceled, but it's finally here. One thing I did want to show while I have all the books up here, it's just these wonderful spines. I love how they're interconnected. I love that they are still following it here in the tradition with Volume 5. Just the weird, obscure-looking art on the spines, which actually, it's all over the place. These are meant to look like those, like brown paper sacks, if you will. And even though this looks like the little wraparound mini dust jackets that you see in manga all over Japan, they're not. They're actually part of the design of the art. So we'll be looking at each one of these, talking about the story, showcasing the artwork, and then of course talk about the latest volume, and also be talking about the build of these Omnis. So let's get started. Alright, so here again is volume 1. Here's what the front cover looks like. All of these do read from left to right in the traditional Japanese way. Now these are the Omnibus editions. They collect 3 of the tankobon in 1. And kicking it off with this very first volume. So this is a manga that was created by Eiji Otsuka, right here, who is the writer. And then Housui Yamazaki is the artist. And the basic premise of this particular manga is about these 5 young graduates from a Buddhist college in Tokyo. And they're trying to make some money on the side. So all of them are being led by this young lady right here, Ao Sasaki. And I'll talk a little bit about the characters here in a few. And pretty much what they do is they all have their own special abilities. Whether they're supernatural abilities or whether they're non-supernatural abilities, they all have to deal with the dead. So in each chapter here, you're going to see them dealing with corpses, and I'll talk about each of their powers when I talk about each of the characters here in a little bit. But that's basically it. They try to make some money, try to have a side hustle by returning the dead to their rightful place. Whether it's the place they want to be buried, whether it's returning the remains to the family, or whether it's solving some kind of crime. It's all about the dead. And this is more like Chew, or if you watch television, Murder, She Wrote, Father Downing's Mysteries. Yes, I went with that instead of, I don't know why I didn't say CSI. But it's all about forensic science and just with a huge supernatural twist in each chapter. As I mentioned, these are 3-in-1s, so these were originally released as 3 tankobons. And the tankobons themselves all have this type of artwork throughout it. I love the design. I think it's really cool. Now, it does have, all of these come wrapped in plastic, and they have a parental advisory sticker on them, and for good reason. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here in a second, but it's mainly due to the mature content when it comes to violence, and then, of course, the details when it comes to the dead. Because whenever you're dealing with zombified or bodies, you're also dealing with some gross things, and there are some over-the-top gross things that happen here. And the artwork may look just like simple, realistic style, kind of a little bit like Urasawa's style, but that's really to lure you into a state of false security, because when it gets into the horror aspect of things, you see a lot of messed up things. And it does not shy away from things like suicide or incest or pedophilia. So if you're squeamish and you can't deal with things like that, because there's a reason why this is mature content, then maybe skip this particular book or this particular series. Now, this first volume right here is the one that kicked it off. This was originally published, I think they came out in like 2015 is when I got these. I decided to go this route and trade up the 3 tankobons that I had because I just like the idea of omnis. Even in this format, it is soft though. And we're going to talk about the build of them here in a little bit. This first volume has 664 pages. All right, see what I mean? This is the parental advisory sticker. And on the covers and back covers, you get to see the staff, but they don't talk about the characters' names. They just tell you about their powers or what their special trait is. So there are a total of 5 of them, 6 if you want to include Kere, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a second. All right, so the 5 of them are this gentleman right here. That is Kuro Karatsu, who is sort of the main character. He's kind of the leader of the bunch. He is a student from the Buddhist college, and he shaves his head because he wants to be a Buddhist monk, but has this uncanny ability to speak with the recently deceased, which is how all these people met. And all he has to do is touch the bodies, allowing them to enter his thoughts at first. But then those powers expand. So it's really interesting. Sometimes he can animate the dead, which becomes a really creepy thing. There are times later on when maybe the dead take over his body. There's another, it could be a ghost that inhabits him, and we don't know, but you can find out for yourself by reading this. And then we also have Ao Sasaki, who is the person that put all this together. She's the leader of the bunch. Let me see if I can find her really quick, because she's not in the first chapter here. Yes, this young lady right here. So Ao's the one that doesn't really have supernatural abilities. She's really good with computer, I guess, because this all started in 2002. And she has a large information network, and that's somehow how they end up getting the jobs. And when I say these people get paid, don't think that they get paid millions of dollars. Sometimes it's the equivalent of like $10. Sometimes it's the equivalent of a lottery ticket, and sometimes they're just doing it out of the kindness of their hearts, as you will see. Then we have Makoto Numata, who is a fan favorite. This guy right here, the cool guy with the jacket. And he's kind of like the big guy. And he is the dowser of the team. So he uses a pendulum to find out where the dead bodies are. And that goes into play a lot throughout this particular series. He has like a tough guy image, but he's also into J-pop big time. So he listens to a lot of Japanese idol singers. So he has an interesting character. He's one of my favorite characters. Then we have Keiko. And Keiko Makino is the embalmer of the group. She studied in America. And embalming is a really interesting thing in Japan because most people get cremated over there. And she's more like your forensic scientist. And they use her ability to try to figure out a crime, to try to figure out what exactly happened to a body. So she does help out, even though she doesn't really have supernatural abilities. Then we have Yuji Yata. That is a huge fan favorite for, I think, most people that have read this, that I've talked to. Love the guy, but it's mainly due to this character right here, Kere, but I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. So he is a really interesting character. He usually has his emo hair right there, and it's pretty much covering his eyes. He's kind of like your dork of the group. He collects or reads manga. So he's kind of, he is your otaku of the group. But he has this weird thing about him that he always has a puppet with him. See what I mean by freaky imagery? Man, that is messed up. And the stories are messed up, but we'll get there in a second. He has a puppet with him. Let's move on to the 3rd volume and talk about this puppet. So, let's see. Staffy puppet. Doesn't really do a good job. But this is the 3rd volume. Let me see if I can find a better picture of him. There he is. And it's a hand puppet that he uses. So, this is the puppet right here. This is Kere Ellis, who is your foul-mouthed puppet that makes fun of everybody. That kind of, I'll be honest, kind of got on my nerves a lot. Both him and Yuji. I really didn't need that kind of comic relief in this, but I'll talk about the importance of that here in a few. But he did grow on me. Like, at first he's just making fun of the group, but then sometimes he actually helps the group out. Now, we think that, it's all Yuji, maybe not, but Kere, the puppet, claims to be an alien that died and is trapped inside of the puppet. And that's why he acts a lot different than Yuji. And it's interesting because Yata most of the time apologizes for Kere and his reactions. Now, there are other couple of characters that end up sort of joining them, but that is mainly your 5. I guess 6 if you include Kere as your 6th character. By the way, I forgot to mention this. Volume 2 has 664 pages, and this volume right here, Volume 3, has a total of 632 pages. This is, I think, the smallest one out of the 6. Now, let's talk more about the stories. Here we have Volume 4. I believe this is the biggest one. This one has 688 pages. So, this is such an interesting story. I talked about how this is in my top 10 favorite horror manga of all time. But it's just really weird because it really isn't exactly horror, because there are some funny elements, including the talking puppet. But I feel like that's a necessity when it comes to something like this, because there's a lot of social commentary. And I mentioned that the author does not shy away from all these horrible things. And all these horrible things, yes, you can look at it and be like, oh, that I don't need to read that. It's depressing. Life is depressing enough as is. But the horrible things that are happening here are taken from headlines. Eiji Otsuka talks about, why he decided to write this. As a matter of fact, I believe it's in Volume 1 when he talks about the loss of his father to cancer. About 20 years later, he lost his mother, lost his teacher when he was, I think he was an anthropologist professor at a university, because he studied anthropology. But he talked about the necessity of, having zombies in books and how they weren't terrifying anymore because of video games and because of movies. And he wanted that horror element back in the manga. So that's what started all of this. But there's also a social commentary, and there's important things in here. There are funny moments, and there are horrible moments that happen because, when dealing with things like pedophilia, when dealing with things like incest, and, horrible things that, not just women, it's men, kids, babies. Oh, man, there's things like that in here. And animals, so, if you can't stomach that. I know it's weird for some people when I always warn my viewers about the treatment of animals or kids, but, yeah, it's different. I get it. I respect that. So, I think this is one of the most interesting manga that I've read, and it's still a horror manga at heart, but there are some powerful moments in here. There are moments that got me. So, some of the stories that you're going to find in here are, it all starts off in the suicide forest. That's where they find each other. And that one, right off the bat, is about family members and what they've done to each other. It's a horrible story. And then you get a little background character arc, which they're mainly episodic, but every once in a while you'll get a long arc that goes over a few chapters. But, for example, the second one is about Ao Sasaki, and, her background and meeting the killer that murdered her mom and dad and one of her sisters. That was rough, man. You get other characters in here. One of my favorite ones is they appeared in the second omnibus, the Kurosagi Corpse Cleaning Service. They're kind of their arch rivals, I guess, in a way, but they, instead of trying to return bodies to where they're supposed to be buried, they clean up murder and suicide sites. But they might be working for another corporation. Now, there is one character I didn't mention, and that is the character of Yaichi. And I didn't want to talk about Yaichi, so I'll just say that for those that have read it, that to me, even after reading the 5th omnibus, is still up in the air as to what exactly he is and should he be trusted. So that is what all I will say about that. So I mentioned some horrible things in here, and I mentioned there are powerful moments. One of my favorite ones is in the first volume, is when they find an older lady whose dead body is in an altar. And it turns out that she committed suicide because this is so messed up. She decided to sacrifice herself so she wouldn't drain her family of any more money. And that was so just powerful. I mean, it's tragic, and I thought it was just a beautiful story about, being that matriarch of the family and then ending up letting go because you feel like it's the right thing to do. So it's commentary like that is all over the place. So yes, while you have a lot of horror elements in here, there are some uplifting and in your face moments. Very graphic again. Let's look at volume 5. So volume 5 is a huge deal for a lot of us. We've been waiting since, I believe, 2018, 2019 when this was first announced. It was canceled. Oh, man. And then they brought it back this year, and then it was postponed. And right before they released this, they reprinted all first 4 volumes. I believe they're out of stock right now, some of them. So if you can find them, go and get them if you're interested in this at all. I completely 100% recommend it if you're into horror and can stomach all the things I was talking about. I believe the new printings are $24.99. The original printings, these right here, were $19.99. And I did talk to Dark Horse, and they did say that I think they're going to do another restock. So this one is special because it's out. And what makes this one even more special is that they only collected volumes 13 and 14 of the Tankobon. This collects 13, 14, and 15. 15 has never been, I don't know why I'm pointing there, I guess that's where it would be. 15 has never been collected in English. So this is the way that Dark Horse has decided to keep going with this particular series, and I love the fact that we're finally getting it again. This one has 648 pages. So while it may seem like a lot of the stories might get repetitive, I'm not going to lie, they do. But they're a nice break from the norm, that's for sure. And the fact that they are mostly episodic, sometimes they're in Japan, sometimes they're in another country. Sometimes they go back to they go back to Suicide Forest in volume 3, I want to say. But and they deal with different types of things. There's like a headless guy that's riding around a bike, a lady that's hypnotizing people, making them do things against their will. So I guess it's CSI, but maybe I'm thinking less CSI and more Scooby-Doo meets Junji Ito. I can't believe I just said that. Now, the most amazing thing about these volumes, I love this so much, and I wish that each manga that was released here was this cared for, and translation notes were like this. So, as you probably noticed, the sound effects are not within the panels. The sound effects are not translated there. You have to go all the way to the back of each chapter. So this is the first, I guess this would be the equivalent of volume 13. So back here is where you get the sound effects translations. Not only that, but you also get notes, historical notes about Japan or about Buddhism, because it's actually teaching you things about Buddhism if you're not familiar. Like I myself am not. So I thought that was really cool, and I love when manga does that. Like that's a lot of the things I've learned about real history comes from comics. And that might sound pathetic, but that's just the way I grew up. Whether it was in the 80s and to this day. And it does make you look up some things. So, I mean, it is thorough. Sometimes there are letters from the actual creators back here, like Eiji Otsuka, like I mentioned, talking about his mom, his dad. And the artwork. It's the other thing I didn't talk about. It's just so boring. I'm saying this in a nice way. It is dull at times. I mean, nothing really special about it that stands out. But you know what? Urasawa is one of my favorite mangaka, and his art's like that. However, as I mentioned before, just because it's boring, I think it makes that impact, that shock factor when you get to something horrible that's happening and coming your way, that much better. I love... Is this the one with the idol? No, that was in another volume. But when it gets to the gore, when it gets to the grotesque, I mean, that's when it really shines. That's when you know what type of book you're reading. Again, lots of nudity, lots of sexual content, violence, grotesque. Not for the faint of heart, but one of the best books out there. One of the most unique horror stories. Now, as far as the build of these, because I do want to talk about that, one of the things I will say is that I am not the biggest fan of these softcover omnis. I never have been, whether they're compendiums or whether they're manga. And what ends up happening a lot of the time is that if you read these so often, you'll start creating creases here on the spine when you're reading this. And sometimes you can prevent that in an annoying way. And you can prevent it by just not opening it up all the way. And which makes it difficult to read the word bubbles if they're in here. Luckily, the distance between the panel and the gutter right there is far enough away that you can make out what's happening. But I never ever suggest like taking the book halfway through and cracking it like that and putting it down, because that is going to crease that spine faster. So no dust jackets, all of them soft cover, glued binding is what you're going to find through here. All of them have a very cool, unique design, different colors on the spine, and this is the way they are continuing the series, because they are not doing the single volume tankobon anymore. So if you're interested in these, this is the way to do it. And seriously, if you're interested in these, I don't know if they're going to reprint them after the next restock or not. Maybe check out volume 1, see if it's for you. But I believe that's everything. I covered everything. I talked about the characters without going into spoilers. I even mentioned a character probably shouldn't have to keep it surprise, but I didn't say exactly who Yaichi's supposed to be. So honestly, the best way I can describe this manga is just fun. Horrible fun. Because there are a lot of horrible things that are happening out there in the real world. And the creators just decide to make light of it, but still honoring the dead, if that makes sense. Because it is about respecting the dead here and honoring their last wishes, while trying to make some money on the side. But that, as they say, what am I doing here? Is that. That's not even in the right place. Damn it, Omar. If you're interested in purchasing these books, don't forget to check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of these books. Let me know in the comments down below if you are picking these up, if you still have the original tankobons, if you hope that they collect every single one of these and go all the way past volume 28, whatever they're at in Japan. But if you have any questions, comments, leave them down below. Smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications so that you know when our videos are going live. We are on Spreadshop and Patreon. Amazing ways to support the channel if you can do so. And more importantly, all of you stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.